Feller told me one time they got a weed down here and they call it a loco weed. When the horses and cows eat it, they get wilder than all get out.
Blocker was just 14 when his father died suddenly in 1972. For 53 years, he kept his feelings locked away. Now at 67, Dan Blocker's son is finally opening up, and fans can't believe what they're hearing. Known for his role in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, he shares how Bonanza's fame affected their family life. The mobs of fans everywhere they went, the childhood moments that slipped by, and the unexpected truth behind his own acting career. His words reveal a side of Hoss Cartwright's quiet son no one saw coming. Dan Blocker was born on December 10, 1928, in Dalhart, Texas, and he made quite the entrance. Weighing in at a whopping 14 pounds, he set a record in Bowie County. His birth certificate was even filed incorrectly. Instead of Bobby Dan Davis Blocker, the doctor wrote Bobby Dawn. His mother Mary endured one of the most painful births in town history, and his father Shaw couldn't have imagined their massive baby would become a giant on American television. That legendary birth was remembered in town for decades. No one broke the 14-pound record until just recently. At age 6, Dan's family moved to O'Donnell, Texas, still mourning the death of his older sister Virginia, who died of pneumonia at age 11. Dan had been just 5 when it happened. Life was difficult, but it went on. Shaw opened a grocery store, and the family lived in the back of it. Dan helped out from a young age, bagging groceries and hauling heavy cattle feed sacks. In a town of about 3,000, Dan stood out, not just because of his size, but his work ethic. By 10, he was 5 feet tall and 105 pounds. At 12, he stood 6 feet and weighed 200 pounds. Locals remember how Main Street was roped off on Saturday nights so Dan could box with older boys. At 13, he was beating men in their 20s, and there's even a tale of him lifting a car off someone when it fell. Whether true or not, nobody doubted it. By high school, Dan was 6 feet 4 inches, 275 pounds, and wore size 14.5 shoes. His father often joked that Dan was too big to ride and too small to pull a wagon, not much use at all. Yet, his size would one day make him a star. At 12, Dan enrolled at the Texas Military Institute in San Antonio, a school that once trained General Douglas MacArthur. The discipline, toughness, and focus he learned there would shape him. In 1946, he joined Hardin-Simmons University and played football, where his massive build gave him a natural edge. But it was at Sul Ross State University where his path shifted. In 1947, he joined the backstage crew of Arsenic and Old Lace and felt something ignite inside. He changed his major from physical education to drama. Despite still playing football, theater became Dan's world. He worked odd jobs, performed in rodeos, and bounced at bars to fund his education. His size made him great for physical roles, but people were amazed by his gentle expressiveness. He graduated in 1950 with a degree in speech and drama. Despite offers from football teams and boxing promoters, Dan turned them all down. He wanted art, not violence. That year, he moved to Boston for summer stock theater, acting in weekly plays for little pay. But life had other plans. In November 1950, Dan was drafted into the U.S. Army as the Korean War intensified. It took the military a month just to find boots in his size. After basic training, Dan was sent to Japan, then the front lines of Korea. He joined F Company, 179th Infantry Regiment, 45th Division. Nicknamed the Big Gun, Blocker quickly rose through the ranks from private to master sergeant. He spent 209 days in combat. On Christmas Eve 1951, he and his squad were pinned down for 10 hours on Hill 255. On May 25, 1952, during a bloody battle at Hill 200, 6 Americans died and 21 were wounded, but the unit took out 132 enemy soldiers. Blocker was shot while rescuing comrades, a heroic act that earned him a Purple Heart and forever changed him. He returned from war a vocal opponent of conflict, particularly Vietnam. His wartime bravery also revealed his leadership. He stayed calm under fire, led ambush responses, and carried wounded soldiers to safety, even while being a huge target himself. Dan's military service ended on September 24, 1952. 2 days later, he married Dolia Lee Parker, his longtime sweetheart. They held a small ceremony in Carlsbad, New Mexico. Then Dan returned to Sul Ross State to earn a master's in drama. To support his family, he taught high school English and drama in Sonora, Texas. His booming voice became a legend among students. He later taught 6th grade and coached in Carlsbad. But he never gave up on acting. Then, fate intervened. During a summer vacation to California, while Dan made a call from a phone booth wearing cowboy gear, a talent agent spotted him. The 6 feet 4 inches Texan looked like he'd walked out of a Western. That chance moment changed everything. Although Dan moved to Los Angeles in 1956 to pursue a Ph.D. in education at UCLA, acting opportunities poured in. He supported his wife and 4 kids, twins Deborah and Dana, born 1953, David, 1955, and Dirk, 1957, by substitute teaching. But Hollywood had already taken notice. In 1956, he made his TV debut as a bartender in Sheriff of Cochise. In 1957, he played a monster called The Goon in a Three Stooges sci-fi short, Outer Space Jitters, credited as Don Blocker. Though only 17 minutes long, the role showed how his size made him unforgettable, even in slapstick comedy. That same year, he appeared in Gunsmoke, Have Gun, Will Travel, Colt .45, A the Rifleman, and Cheyenne, always cast as a tough man, outlaw, or enforcer. They weren't glamorous roles, but they got him noticed. People remembered the gentle giant with the booming voice. Then came Dan Blocker's journey to television fame began with a role that changed everything for him, Maverick. In that Western series, he played a character named Hognose Hughes, which Blocker later described as the most important role of his early career. Unlike other Westerns, Maverick was clever, filled with humor, and Blocker fit right in. He wasn't just a large man, he was funny and full of charm. That balance between strength and humor caught the attention of casting directors and producers. It was the first time they saw that he could blend comedy and drama, a trait that would later define his most iconic role as Hoss Cartwright in Bonanza. That revelation began with Hognose Hughes. In 1958, Blocker secured another recurring role in the short-lived Western Cimarron City, where he played Tiny Carl Budinger. Although the show only lasted 1 season, it brought him into contact with producer David Dortort, who remembered Blocker from earlier appearances in The Restless Gun, where Blocker had portrayed both a blacksmith and a cattleman. Dortort liked what he saw and kept Blocker in mind. So when he began developing a new series about a family of ranchers in the American West, he knew exactly who he wanted. When the creators of Bonanza started casting in 1959, they weren't sure who would play most roles, but one thing was clear: Hoss Cartwright was written specifically for Dan Blocker. The producers didn't even audition anyone else. And they were right. Though the show started slowly, debuting at number 45 in the ratings, Blocker's heartfelt performance helped turn things around. Gradually, Bonanza climbed the charts and soon became the most-watched show on American television. Initially, Hoss was meant to be a simple, even dim-witted character, a big man with a strong punch and little dialogue. But Blocker, who stood 6 feet 4 inches and weighed over 300 pounds, eventually 365, brought unexpected depth to the role. He wasn't just physically imposing. He had a master's degree, had taught English, and once planned to earn a Ph.D. Instead of playing Hoss as a dull brute, he portrayed him as thoughtful, kind, and full of heart. The writers took notice and started rewriting the character to match Blocker's warmth and intelligence. Hoss evolved from comic relief to the moral soul of the show. By the 3rd season, Bonanza was number 2 in the ratings, and audiences had fallen in love with Hoss. Behind the scenes, the work was grueling. Unlike today's shows that produce 10 or 12 episodes per season, Bonanza churned out over 30 each year. Blocker worked 14-hour days, 5 days a week. The heat, the costumes, the stunts, and the writing were exhausting, especially for a man of his size. Sometimes he even passed out from the heat. Still, he kept going. He once said he spent more time with his on-screen family than with his real one, his wife and 4 kids. By the time 1972 arrived, he had filmed 415 episodes, a feat that would push any modern actor to the brink. What makes his story even more poignant is what he gave up. Before Bonanza, Blocker's dreams had nothing to do with fame. He earned his master's degree in Texas and became a teacher, instructing 6th graders in English and drama. When he moved to California, it was to pursue a Ph.D. at UCLA. Acting came by accident. Someone saw him in a cowboy outfit and invited him into the industry. Even after being cast in Bonanza, he initially continued his studies. But eventually, the demands of filming made it impossible. In interviews, he talked about juggling school and work, But by 1961, he had to put his PhD on hold, and he never got the chance to return. He later said it was his biggest regret. Still, his contribution to television was enormous. Haas wasn't just a character. He was the emotional heartbeat of Bonanza. Studies in the mid-60s confirmed that audiences saw Haas as the show's core. Blocher said he always played Haas with one quote in mind: "If there is any kindness we can show, let us do it now, for we will never pass this way again." And he meant it, on and off screen. From 1964 to 1967, Bonanza was the #1 show in the United States, watched by nearly 19 million households every Sunday at 9 p.m. It climbed from 45th place to the very top, holding a top 5 spot for 9 straight years, an unmatched achievement. The show was also an international hit, airing in almost 50 countries including Canada, Brazil, France, Thailand, and even Saudi Arabia. CBS didn't find a worthy competitor until the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour in 1967. Blocher's fame even extended beyond television. In 1963, at the height of Bonanza's popularity, he opened a real steakhouse called the Bonanza Sirloin Pit in Westport, Connecticut. It quickly caught on, with people trusting the name. By 1966, two brothers, Sam and Charles Wyant, bought the brand and expanded it rapidly. Meanwhile, in Indiana, a similar chain emerged called Ponderosa Steakhouse. Eventually, both chains grew until they merged under Metromedia in 1989, and by 1997 had nearly 600 restaurants. Though only about 75 locations remained by 2019, Blocher had turned his TV fame into something tangible, something you could sit down and taste. His film career also grew. In 1963, he starred alongside Frank Sinatra in Come Blow Your Horn, a Neil Simon comedy that grossed $12.7 million and ranked among the year's top movies. In 1968, he reunited with Sinatra for Lady in Cement, a gritty Miami crime thriller where he played a menacing businessman named Rudy Koerman. Off-screen, Blocher's life was full of surprises. His children even took karate lessons from Chuck Norris before Norris became famous. They trained alongside the kids of fellow cast member Michael Landon. The cast of Bonanza had become like a real family. Blocher married Dolphia Parker in 1952, whom he met in college. They remained together until his untimely death in 1972. Their son David became a successful producer, winning an Emmy in 1998, and another son, Dirk, followed in his father's footsteps to become an actor. Despite the fame, Blocher remained grounded and devoted to his real family. Mitch Vogel, who played Jamie on Bonanza, once said Blocher was the kind of guy you could just grab a beer with, kind, genuine, and approachable. But behind his joyful presence, Dan Blocher was struggling. His enormous frame, which gave him such presence on screen, also carried health risks. By early 1972, he began experiencing gallbladder issues, though few realized how serious it was. At that time, gallbladder surgeries were far riskier than today, especially for larger patients. Some believe that if he'd had the operation even a decade later, he might have survived. But in 1972, medicine hadn't caught up, and his size made everything more dangerous. He kept his suffering private, always smiling on screen while fighting a quiet, losing battle behind it. Just 2 months before his death, director Robert Altman had cast him in a major new role in The Long Goodbye, a tough part that might have redefined his career. Tragically, Dan Blocher never got the chance. His life ended too soon, but the legacy he left behind, as Haas Cartwright, a gentle giant with a kind soul, continues to resonate with fans around the world. Dan Blocher was set to take on a bold new role as a down-and-out alcoholic writer in Robert Altman's The Long Goodbye, a part that would have shown the world he could do far more than play the kind-hearted Haas Cartwright. But fate had other plans. Before filming began, Blocher passed away, and the role went to Sterling Hayden, who delivered a powerful performance, even improvising lines while actually drunk. Still, Altman never fully recovered from the loss of Blocher, and though he continued with the film, he added a special tribute in the credits, in special remembrance of Dan Blocher. It was a simple line, but one that reflected just how deeply Blocher was loved by those who worked with him. His death on May 13, 1972, came suddenly after what was supposed to be a routine gallbladder surgery. Complications developed quickly. A pulmonary embolism blocked his lungs, and despite doctors' efforts, he passed at 4:10 a.m. He was only 43. The news hit like a shockwave across the country. His wife, Dolphia, was left to raise their 4 children, twin daughters Deborah and Dana, and sons David and Dirk, while also facing the sudden storm of public grief. Thousands attended the funeral, including friends, co-stars, and fans who had loved Hoss. Michael Landon gave a short, heartfelt speech. "He made us laugh. He made us better." Blocker was buried in a quiet cemetery in Texas, far from Hollywood, but never forgotten. Bonanza was already in its 13th season when Dan died, and while the show had enjoyed strong ratings for years, his absence left a gaping emotional hole. The ratings plummeted. Producer Richard Collins later said, "Just as we personally suffered a loss, so the audience suffered one too." The 14th season premiere drew strong numbers only because people were curious about how the show would handle Hoss's death. After that, viewership dropped by nearly 40%. NBC blamed the schedule change, but fans knew the truth. They couldn't bear to watch Bonanza without Hoss. Even Lorne Greene, who played Ben Cartwright, saw it coming. He told his wife, "That's it. It's finished." He was right. NBC canceled the show in November, and the final episode aired on January 16, 1973. After 14 seasons and 431 episodes, Bonanza was over. In the small town of O'Donnell, Texas, a quiet corner holds the memory of the man the world knew as Hoss Cartwright. On July 4, 1973, just over a year after Dan's death, a bronze bust of him was unveiled in the town where he grew up. The plaque reads, "Thanks to film, Hoss Cartwright will live." But all too seldom does the world get to keep a Dan Blocker. The statue stands where his father Shaq Blocker once ran a general store, and young Bobby Dan would help out. Across the street is the O'Donnell Heritage Museum, where an entire room is dedicated to Dan's life, from his birth as the largest baby ever recorded in Bowie County, weighing 14 pounds, to his rise as one of the most beloved TV stars in America. And on the side of a barn off Highway 87, a massive mural of him welcomes visitors, a tribute to the gentle giant the town raised. Dan's son Dirk Blocker, born July 31, 1957, in Los Angeles, was only 14 when his father died. But he had already stepped into the world of show business, appearing in a car commercial with Dan at age 7. Despite the loss, Dirk kept going. Just 2 years later, at 16, he made his TV debut on Marcus Welby, MD, and by 19 had a regular role on Baa Baa Black Sheep as Lieutenant Jerry Bragg. Over the years, he built a steady career, appearing in Poltergeist, Starman, MASH*, The X-Files, and even 2 Bonanza follow-up films. But his biggest break came in 2013, when at 56, he was cast as Detective Hitchcock in the hit comedy Brooklyn Nine-Nine. He appeared in 147 episodes, proving to a new generation that he was a talented actor in his own right, not just Hoss's son. Now 66, Dirk has begun to open up about what it was like growing up as Dan Blocker's son. He remembers how fame followed their family, how fans would swarm them in public, and how that made him want a different kind of life. He chose character roles, stayed out of the spotlight, and built a career rooted in steady work, not stardom. But no matter how far he stepped from the spotlight, his father's shadow was always there, a mix of pride and pressure. Dirk wanted to honor Dan's legacy but also prove he could make it on his own. Watching the world love someone you miss every day is a strange experience. When Dan died, it left a scar that shaped Dirk's entire life. What stayed with him most wasn't the fame but the values his father embodied. Dan Blocker wasn't just a TV star, he was a kind, humble man. On set, people talked more about his generosity than his acting. He didn't act like a celebrity. He acted like a good man who happened to be on TV. That quiet strength left a deep impression on his son. Dirk learned how to balance fame with family, how to remain grounded while standing in the glow of public admiration. And through it all, he carried his father's memory, not just as Hoss Cartwright, but as the man who tucked him in at night.